I really want us to talk about RSD because it's such a frequent occurrence with our neurodiverse population, and we need to understand how that happens and why it happens and how we can deal with RSD. So maybe we should start off by describing what RSD is. I'm Dr. Tom, psychiatrist, specialist in neurodiversity. I'm a neurodiversity advocate, and this channel has a clear, unapologetic stance in defense of neurodiverse people. No BS, no virtue signaling, just solid, honest content grounded in science, lived experience, and real-world relevance. If you're tired of cliches and want strong, actionable ideas that challenge stigma, clarify concepts, and empower neurodivergent individuals and allies alike, you are in the right place. RSD is rejection-sensitive dysphoria. As you are aware, I know, but we just use RSD for short. Having to explain every time what dysphoria is suck ass.
A little negative too when you hear that word too much.
Right, and then we get into dystopia, and then we realize we are part of a dystopian world, and this is why we have RSD. So rejection-sensitive dysphoria is a symptom of neurodiversity, and it means that the person that suffers RSD, which is approximately 50% of the neurodiverse population, will experience suffering and pain by the mere perception of rejection, failure, or judgment. And none of this has to be real. It can just be a perception.
Okay.
But it might also be real, of course. So someone with RSD will experience avoidance. They will try to not go expose themselves to situations where they might experience rejection. Someone with RSD will probably have had a past experience of true rejection. So if you're neurodiverse, it's clear that schools and workplace and social interactions aren't appropriate and not adequate, and they don't try to accommodate for neurodiverse people. So if you're neurodiverse, you're probably going to have a hard time in any of these situations, and you're going to end up experience true rejection. Your teacher might say that you're not capable of listening. Your parent might say that you're not being a good kid, that you're misbehaving, and that will eventually and most likely lead to a situation where you will end up not exposing yourself to situations that might lead to rejection. So there is a high chance that you will try not to go on dates. There's a high chance that you will not go on job interviews you're not 100% comfortable with. There is a good chance that you'll avoid social interactions. But on the flip side, let's say you feel a lot of rejection in academics or in family life, you might end up avoiding family and academics, and for this specific example, and find your adequate feedback in social life. So one might say that, okay, if I experience RSD, should I not be capable of experiencing social life? But there's a minor catch here, because if you get a really good feedback, let's say you're really good at masking in social interaction, then maybe you would prefer social interaction, so you could actually end up avoiding the part of your life that's more troublesome, that causes more perceived or real rejection.
You talk about perceived rejection and actual rejection quite a bit in the explanation. So perceived rejection, being before it actually happens, would you kind of anticipate to happen?
Sure. But there might also be a situation where you interpret someone's actions as a true rejection, but it might not be a true rejection.
Anticipation or preparing yourself for the rejection rather than waiting for it to happen.
Right. It doesn't have to happen at all. Exactly.
Okay.
And obviously, if you do avoid social interaction because of the anticipation of rejection, that obviously leads to a negative feedback cycle where you end up exposing yourself less, and there is no corrective experience whatsoever because you're not exposing yourself.
Right. Almost like overthinking in a way. It's overthinking with focusing on rejection, but overthinking the situation. Oh, should I, if we're talking about school, should I go up and answer this question? What if I get it wrong? And then, people have a bad opinion about me, rejection from peers, or things like that. Or you don't ask someone out on a date. You're sitting there imagining all the situations. You're overthinking the situation to the point that you keep yourself from enjoying things. Is that
So the way we're framing this right now worries me a bit because it puts much of the guilt or the responsibility on the person that experiences RSD. So when we say it's a perceived rejection, that really isn't important at all. The fact that people with neurodiversity experience more perceived rejection is necessarily linked to the fact that they do experience more real rejection. So when we talk about perceived rejection, and when you talk about overthinking or framing it as anticipation anxiety or social anxiety based on overthinking, that's kind of unfair to the neurodiverse person. So it's really important to drive home that point that we do experience real rejection, and this leads to ourselves being the ones that exclude ourselves from social interaction that's meaningful and important to this society we're living in. But this is really important. We have to realize that we do live in a somewhat dystopian society, and this society is not at all prepared to accommodate for neurodiversity, as it isn't prepared to accommodate for other diversities. Being a minority or being of a different sexual preference or a gender queer
right?
are obvious examples of situations where you're going to get judged in this current society.
Sure. Okay. You're kind of mentioning like society's not prepared would be the key word, right? It's not prepared for people with neurodiversities, with other things, and myself being in the LGBT community. Yeah, like I could see where we would experience rejection at different levels than the typical person.
Sure.
With neurodiversity, I can think of a good life example I had with rejection for this, actually. In Algebra 1, I remember, this is like a core memory for me. If you ever watch Inside Out, it's a bubble. It's one of those little marbles in that movie. It's not a good one.
So this is one of the one that's projected to your whole brain, yes. And you're constantly reminded of this is who you are?
Yes.
Cool.
So in Algebra 1, there was a basic algebra equation.
What age were you approximately?
Oh God, I want to say 12 or 13.
Okay.
In that range. So in Algebra 1, I took it in 8th grade, and there was a simple equation. It was one of the first equations you learn. And we've learned it so many times that I wasn't really paying attention. And I'm the kind of kid that in math would just give you the answer, and the teacher would be like, "Where's all your work?"
Sure, yeah,
and I'd be like, "I just know the answer." That's me. I can write it in my head. So I put this equation up. It was a simple answer. And I actually stopped him to ask him. And I was like, every time you put this one equation up, whatever the equation was, I wish I could remember exactly what I changed about it. But I said, you always put this one equation up. If you add this little bit to the end of it, I said, I don't know why, you get the answer right away instead of going through your entire solution. And I was like, I can't think of a number or a problem that my solution didn't work to. So on tested things, I would use my extra solution, find the answer right away. And it was much easier, it was much quicker. But because it wasn't his way to do it, it was wrong.
So this is, when you kind of calculate in your head how much you should tip, and you just take your total and you move the decimal one over, and then you do times 2 or times 3, and that's the easier workaround. But it's not just doing the actual calculation of your total
Right.
times 1.3 whatever. Good. Right.
That was algebra for me, was that I would simplify everything. And it was right. But I was, to use the vocabulary today, rejected and saying that it was always wrong. So I stopped deviating from...
Deviating is a very strong word.
Well, yeah, I mean...
It's like you went right to jail right after.
but
yeah, the person definitely made you feel like you were cheating or wrong.
Right. Right, because I could do the problem much easier, much more simply than they could, but I was wrong. And so having the real life rejection in that sense also made me from that point on go, I can't be creative in problem solving. I have to do it the way the teacher says. And so the real rejection created fake or perceived rejection, because at that point I was just like always, no, I can't do it this way because the teacher will, say it's wrong.
So 2 takeaways. The one being that at 12, 13, because of that teacher's correction, you started your life in crime.
Yes.
And the second takeaway, that we will never know what you might have created if you weren't corrected like that.
Sure. And it's because he wasn't ready for a change. And we were talking about society being prepared. I feel like that's an example of that. It was like,
totally,
he wasn't prepared for someone to shake up what he was teaching, and therefore kind of squashed any potential I had in that. Because from that point on, I had to do it his way or I was in trouble.
But to the second takeaway, I kind of, there is probably an answer to this, because if you weren't to live through that rejection right there, you'd probably do that like a week after in a different class. So this is the point I'm making about society not being prepared. And it's usually like the first bigger experiences of rejection are probably around those ages of 12, 13, 14. Like, this is when social proof gets really important. This is when your parents' approval isn't self-sufficient anymore. This is when you want to fit in, right? This is when you want to be one of the cool kids. This is when you decide that you want to be popular, unless you decide that on purpose you're going to be the nerd, whatever. But that impact at that time at this crucial age is just fucked up. I'm really sad about the many kids that are still living through this nowadays, because schools don't accommodate for different learning styles. Why should you have to do everything the same way everybody does? Instead of being neurodiversity affirming and praising your approach, that person just killed the seed inside you for being creative and original.
And that happens all the time. And it's because there's no flexibility, I think.
The one thing that changed immediately in yourself is that you had to adequate yourself to the system and not the system to yourself, right? And then that probably most likely, as it would in many patients, led you to trying to be a perfectionist in the sense of the creator of the idea of perfectionism. So you had to do everything perfectly the way that society understood you should.
Right.
Which saddens me deeply, really.
It also creates the long-term effect of you get rejected for creativity or for being a little bit different or thinking differently, that you, as the words I was saying earlier, you kind of anticipate the rejection coming again. So you kind of get into a cycle of it.
Were you capable of putting that one rejection in the apartment of math, or did that cross departments and you felt like you could be
I think that particular one stayed in the Department of Education.
Okay.
So it was while I'm in school, while I'm under the watch of a teacher, I have to do everything how they listed it out. It might not be the most creative or efficient way. My my solution to the math problem to me was an efficiency thing. It was I could cut out 12 steps of your equation by adding one simple step. It made me realize that in a place of authority, when there's someone above me, my input isn't as important creatively as much as like if they want X as the outcome, they want X as the outcome. They don't want X, Y, Z, A, B, C, with work too. If my boss says, hey, can you do this report? I'll do that report. But in the back of my mind, I'm going, I could automate this entire process, cut out 3 hours of work, save time. But because it's not the way the boss said it, I'm not going to even bother trying.
There is a catch-21 on that. Then if you are doing the thing quickly, then you might just get more work. So you'll think twice about being efficient, right?
Right. Yeah. I could save 2 hours of work that could be used for other things, but because it's not what they said, I'm not deviating, again, that word, I know, from the path or the structure that they gave me. It's because the fear is if I do it my way, it could be correct. It could be better than correct. But if they don't like it, they're going to reject my proposal, my method, and then I have to do it their way anyway. So instead of being creative and creating my own way, I just do it their way just to not cause problems.
And waste time because they're going to reject your solution either way.
Right.
So I really hate any kind of statement that starts with supposed to. Like, we as a family, we are supposed to, or to be part of modern society, you are supposed to, or you have to work this way because you're supposed to. Like, whenever someone says supposed to, I really feel like there is a magical belief that's not founded in anything else but that person's belief. So I really feel like I really strongly feel that when someone starts off a sentence by saying it's supposed to, I feel like, okay, I'm already gonna hate this. So maybe saying that society is supposed to not be the way it is a reasonable example of a supposed to that I would accept. But this magical belief that somehow also means that your belief is better than the other person's belief is really something that annoys me too much. So I have a personal experience as well. I remember that being a child, I'm not sure about my age, but probably early childhood here. I remember that I used to just, I guess, freely, openly shout out my ideas and talk randomly without questioning the way I was thinking about stuff. So I remember my dad telling me that I was supposed to think about my sentences before I say my sentences.
Sure.
And I kind of remember that before my dad's intervention, this is kind of magical. I do understand that there's probably some mystique involved too, and that's probably not a real memory, but still the way I remember is that before my dad's intervention, I was capable of just putting my ideas together in my head, in pictures, in ideas, just without the physical, tangible form of written or words that have to be written. And then I started organizing my thoughts because I was supposed to in words.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously I did do less impulsive behaviors and impulsive talking.
Sure. Reactions.
So, yeah, right. Probably talked less bullshit, but still I strongly feel, and I felt it that back then, that I was kind of limiting my creativity. And like once you have to put everything in words, you are limiting yourself. So, this is probably a bit off topic, but still in linguistics, there is this idea of linguistic determinism, also known as Sapir-Whorf. There is two versions of this. There is a light version and there is a strong version. The strong version proposes that you are limited by your language in how much you're capable of thinking about stuff. So, the Inuit have supposedly 50 words for white because they need to understand the 50 shades of white to understand if this snow is a good snow, if it's safe to walk on, if it's been contaminated, if there were polar bears walking on, whatever. That's the idea of the strong version of Sapir-Whorf. So they're saying that if the Inuit have a word for this specific type of white, if I don't have it in my Austrian language, I am forever condemned of not understanding the concept of this form of white, which basically is bullshit, and probably no one in modern linguistics would agree that that's a real thing. But there is a lighter version of the Sapir-Whorf principle that suggests that language does modulate your thoughts and your capability of understanding concepts. And that's much better founded in science. Actually, the best study I can remember is about a group of Swedish/Spanish bilinguals, and they had this visual representation of the passing of time. And I feel like I don't remember which is which, but in Spanish, I feel like they used big sizes, like as in tall buildings, to represent time. And in Swedish, pretty sure it's Swedish, they used long, narrow visualizations. Because in Swedish, you use long descriptions of the passing of time, and in Spanish, you use big and large descriptions of the passing of time. And depending on the description you did, and depending on the language the bilingual person used to describe how much time passed, that was impacted by the visualization they did. So while I do believe that Sapir-Whorf in terms of modulating your comprehension does exist for real, the hard version is probably mostly proven to be wrong, right?
Okay.
So, but this is something that I really feel still that this is connected to my childhood experience. I feel like my language got limited there. I don't feel like Sapir-Whorf, the hard version, is a thing, so I'm not too worried. But I still feel like I got limited. And obviously, we're not talking about linguistics here, but the way you thought about your math problem is also pretty awesome, actually. And you might obviously we're not gonna say that you were discovering something really new, incredible, right. But you were cut down. And
right. It could have been something. And what's sad with
the way you thought about this might be the way people think about it in China.
Sure. And my teacher obviously wouldn't know, but it's different if he had looked at what I gave him and said, oh, that does work. Okay, is different than him saying, you got the right answer, but it's not the textbook. And I can understand, especially with math, a lot of times you go step by step, because if you skip a step or if you change a step, it might work for this question, but it's not going to work for every question. But when I presented it to him, I said, every time I changed the numbers, I changed the order, everything I did, my step always gave me the correct answer. I would have loved if he'd been like, okay, let's look further into it. That's different. That's not rejection. That's let's expand. It's a soft exception versus a hard rejection.
Sure. So what we do recommend nowadays in terms of trying to prepare your school and your teaching to be neurodiversity affirmative is to make sure you and the student, or you being a student, you and the teacher, understand what the goal of that specific exercise is. Your teacher probably thought that the goal of this exercise was to do it his way. It's most likely wrong, but whatever. The fact that he did not understand that you were getting to exactly the outcome that apparently or that was communicated as the goal, right? To solve the fucking equation. That he wasn't capable of thinking about this differently as, sure, I not want to criticize your teacher specifically because we are still dystopian and used to be more dystopian back then. So
Right. And this is coming from a memory tree, like you said.
sure,
There could be
might not
some
be.
problems with it, but
But definitely things like that do happen all the time, and we have to be like, we have to make a point in being more neurodiversity affirming. Different learning styles. There is no reason for you to hate on someone who has a dyscalculia just because they're using a calculator, but they are doing college grade math. We've already described how RSD happens, and that it's probably in most cases linked to real rejection, right? But now we should probably talk a bit about that person's experience. So obviously in the next step, we should talk about what that means and what that person ends up doing in terms of trying to be a perfectionist, trying to be a people pleaser, trying to avoid conflict, or trying to avoid social contact overall. But for now, let's talk about what people that experience RSD feel while they are experiencing RSD. So the most important thing, and that's probably the most intense of the symptoms that people experience while having an episode of RSD, are really intensive mood shifts. So this is something that we often confuse with BPD, borderline personality disorder. And it's also a feature of borderline personality disorder, which also comes with a comorbidity of emotional dysregulation. And that might also be a part of RSD, but just to keep it simple for now and talking about RSD, the mood shifts based on rejection are really, really important and might lead to other comorbidities just because of the perceived rejection, not just because of the other consequences long term.
okay. So changing in mood, would that include energy?
It could definitely include energy. So let's just talk about an example here. Let's say you have a boss and you're sending a message and you're not quite sure about how to phrase that message, and you're not quite sure whether or not you should make a demand or whether you should try to correct something, or maybe you shouldn't be too aggressive, and you're trying really hard to be assertive in your message, but you're not quite sure if you were.
Okay.
And then you send this message. Let's just say you send it, and then your boss just ghosts you and doesn't respond for 24 hours. There's a good chance that you will feel you fucked up. Specifically so if right after sending the message, you see your boss online, but he doesn't respond, or you see that he visualized the message and he doesn't respond. And then you're probably gonna be in pain 24 hours and thinking about what you've done and how to correct that, and if you should. And if you have someone to talk to about, you probably are gonna talk about that with that special someone. Doesn't have to be your partner. It could be a therapist, counselor, obviously. But then within the 24 hours, when the 24 hours are over, your boss responds, awesome input. Thank you so much. I love it. We'll do what you're proposing. Yeah. And then you get the mood shift. It's pretty obviously. So the first reaction once you see your boss online or visualizing your message and doesn't respond, you're obviously going to be in pain. And right after, when the boss sends you the message, they're probably going through, I'd even say the Kubler-Ross stages of
like almost stages of grief.
Exactly, yeah. So negotiating, anger, depression, whatnot. And then you probably, there might be a few mood shifts within those first 24 hours of mood shifts, but the basic understanding is that you might switch from really strong pain and anger to really happy feelings for basically no reason when you think in practical terms, because you did not have an answer And if you don't have an answer, there's a good chance that you will try to double down or avoid or confront that person based on what you perceive to be a rejection. So if you don't get an answer, you might just feel that, okay, that person does not comply with your proposal, right? And then you might go as far as to insult him and maybe worsen things for you, while you just should have kept it down, but because of the RSD, you're not capable of.
Okay. And so it's interesting you talk about like receiving messages and receiving like confirmation that they saw the message, because that is so big in social media and communication nowadays. Um, you know, we are in Brazil, so here the key communication is WhatsApp. WhatsApp has the check marks. You know, it's almost a process. If you send a message and it's not sending, it's a clock. Then when it sends, it's a check. When the person receives it, it's 2 checks. And if you have the setting on, depending, when they read the message, the checks turn blue. And I feel like other social medias are like that too. I think Instagram is like that, where it's
well, yeah.
seen, or sent and then seen. So
And they even might show you that the other person is typing,
yes.
increasing to that if they're typing and then they delete it and they don't send.
Yeah. So we're putting ourselves in a situation where we are maybe facing a fake rejection more often, because if we see that blue check mark, our minds aren't going, maybe they didn't even see it. Maybe their phone notification, they hit up the notification and it opened by accident. They didn't have time to read. Like, there's so many different scenarios that could happen. But with social media and the way that we can kind of track what people are doing, almost increases the amount of opportunity to feel rejected with things like that.
And this probably ties into the ruminative, the overthinking, the obsessive thinking about what's happening, right? Because of the tools that social media give us to do that. But there's one thing, just to talk about the other side that's not responding. There's one thing that I always suggest my patients consider, that there's a good chance if the person is not responding that they just don't feel like they have the time you deserve right now to answer. So if you do this really heartfelt, warm and kind and really well thought through message, if that person just responds you with a thumbs up, you're probably gonna get mad as well. So when I open a message like this, I like to be prepared to respond, but I might not be in that spot to be able to respond. And there's another consequence of that. If I feel like I need like 10, 15 minutes to respond adequately, I might forget that I opened that message. So what I like to do is try to pin it, to WhatsApp. You can pin up to 3 chats to the top of your chats and try to not forget about them, but it limits you at 3 chats. So if one of these chats is your grandma that you don't want to forget to say happy birthday next week, and you're pinning it for that, all right? And then the other 2 are whatever, bills or special someone in your life, and then the 4th is already lost. So there is a really good chance, and that reasoning is obviously not as intuitive as you would like it to be, but there's a good chance that by not responding, that person is actually showing you
almost compassion.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they're showing you that you're worthy of a good response,
Sure.
but they're not capable of. So there's this really great story from the life of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. That's the German writer that did Faust and the Sorrows of Young Werther. He sends a letter to his sister starting the letter off, this is like a gigantic letter, and he starts the letter off saying, "I'm sorry, sister," I forgot the name, but I'm pretty sure it's Anna. But I'm sorry, Anna. Let's just go with Anna for now. "I'm sorry, Anna. I didn't have the time to send you a short response, so I did a long one." And it makes total sense to me, If you were just able, Maybe nowadays, now that WhatsApp transcribes audio messages, maybe we should use that tool a bit more. But even if you like send the audio message while you're in the car, the other person might still understand that you're not taking the time you deserve, and you might feel like you're showing that you're not taking the time you deserve. So
And you make a good point about the showing part. Is I can relate to that with family members. I could receive messages from my family 10 minutes, 5 minutes before I have a class. I see the message. I don't respond to it because I know if I respond now, they know I'm free. But I'm not free. I'm free for 5 minutes.
awesome, right?
So I don't respond right away. And then sometimes that message might get lost and it might be sometime before I can respond. But it's because when I did see the message, I knew at that moment I couldn't respond and give them the time that I know that they would almost expect me to have for them. If they send me a message and I don't respond, they know I'm busy. But it's either 0 or 100 with family sometimes.
So there might be a chance that they want to call you at that same second, and then you reject the call, and it's just get worse.
Right. So yeah, sometimes you have to filter yourself to be like, no, I can't respond because if I respond now, I don't have 20 minutes to talk. I have 2 minutes. So it goes both ways. But with back to rejection, the person on the other end can't always imagine or understand that people have those problems. Even if I can understand it for myself, I know I won't message so and so because if I do, I need to have 20 minutes free to talk to them. I know I do that. I know that's something that other people might do. But if other people do it to me, I might not give them the same benefit of the doubt almost. And so you feel it as more of a rejection, even though logically shit happens.
Sure. But there is a really important point to be made here about about logic, and that even if you can manage to talk to someone, a therapist and a counselor, and you understand that you do not have proof of what you understand as rejection, there's still, we have to cut some slack for people that experience that, as you and I have in the past. You might have as well, and maybe still do.